Um, First, I'd like to thank you for inviting me talking about the new book published about the utopian perspective of Mr. Avitan, and to express my sorrow for not being present in flesh at the conference. My remarks will relate mainly to the several contexts of the book, and I will not relate directly to the content of the book itself. As for the context, I'll relate to the historical context and the current context of the publication of this book. And I'll begin by the latter. That is the feel of surprise that such a publication appears in 2016. The surprise is quite telling in the sense that it reveals the imagination, the sociological, mainly imagination of Israelis about the reality or realities of Moroccan Jewish existence in the past. Namely, Moroccan Jews are and were conceived as pertaining to what the sociologists called traditional society. That is a society that is committed to its past, that consecrate the past, and wishes as much as it can to maintain it. While the book itself is discussing a utopian future. That is, it is oriented to a future. But this is only one point. The other point that is quite telling is that this surprise also exposes the imagination, as I said, about Moroccan Jews in the past. That is, Moroccans were, according to this sociological imagination, were characterized as non-modern, and therefore having nothing to do with kind of modernist trends like the Haskalah or the Jewish Enlightenment movement. Clearly, Avitan is well aware of such a movement within the Jewish world that evolved, of course, in Europe. So he is not a secluded Jew living in a kind of remote Atlas Mountain primitive person, but rather he appears as a person who is well aware of what's going on in the world in general and the Jewish European world in particular. The language that he employs is a kind of mixture of the Haskalah language with a kind of, I'm hesitant to use the word, but without a better one, I would say an archaic Hebrew. This is the imagination of the Moroccans as non-modern or as traditionalist, if not primitive, is an image that was nurtured by many sociological studies that described the migration of Moroccan Jews in particular, and what is called Mizrahi Jews in general, as a migration from from traditional societies to a modern society. Well, apparently this is not the case, and I have to emphasize that Abitan was not the only person that was flirting with the modernist Haskalah movement in Morocco. There was a bunch of activists and thinkers in Morocco. Most of them were concentrated in the city of Essaouira and not Casablanca. It's a city that is southern to Casablanca. And this is not an anonymous group of people. Quite the contrary, many studies were have been written about them. The most prominent researcher who wrote about them is Yosef Shitrit from Haifa University, who discussed several writings of this group of people that include Abraham El-Maleh and some others. And I also, in my recent book titled Return to Casablanca, dedicate a chapter to such an image also, a person called Yitzhak Ben Yaisha Levi, who writes to a kind of in a kind of uneven intervals, some kind of reportage, or I would say even some kind of ethnographies about his hometown, about Essaouira mainly, to the Hatzfira journal in the 1890s. He writes through about through a period of about 3 years, tens of short ethnographies, and he employs also a Hebrew that is heavily influenced by the Haskalah movement. So to sum up this short introduction about one aspect of the context, I would like to stress again that the image nurtured by social sciences in Israel is shattered when we study more closely and intimately all kinds of cultural products that was manufactured by people in Morocco.